Do you know what I like to do more than watch paint on the wall dry? Going to work a 9 to 5 job like our protagonist. Just look at all the excitement on his face as he was crossing the road while he was headed to the building where he's supposed to have an interview for a new job. And I know what you're gonna say now. Oh my god, another story that starts with a truck coon killing our protagonist dead on the spot. But no. Our protagonist is not a loser like that. Now you better listen to me closely. If you die by truck coon, you are a loser. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm sorry if you know somebody that died like this. I was just joking. Anyways, he survived the truck coon attack, fortunately, but unfortunately for him, the truck coon was transporting horses, which killed our protagonist dead on the spot. But before we get into what exactly happens after dying in this world, let me just tell you a little bit more about his day before he went to get a job interview. So as our protagonist was preparing to go for a job interview, and right as he was putting his shoes on to go out, his little sister Kusonoki reminded him that they had a hamburger for dinner and that even if he failed to get a job, he shouldn't be disappointed and had to go home right away. Our protagonist asked her why she was saying such discouraging things right before he went to the interview, and she told him all cutesy that their parents in heaven would pray for him. We then learned that 3 years ago their parents passed away by a truck coon, and our protagonist and his little sister had to live by themselves in some pretty harsh living condition. However, we see that his little sister always supported him and cared for him, and not only that, she had invested on stocks under his name on his behalf when he turned 20, and so our protagonist kept a blind eye because he hoped that his little sister would become a successful millionaire. He was thinking that it was better to quit school and look for a job, but his sister didn't seem to like him looking for a job, which was why she got involved in the stock market in the first place. However, our protagonist knew that his responsibility was to find this job even if it got turned down 100 times already. And as he was leaving their apartment, his sister Kusanagi reminded him to buy sukiyaki ice cream for her, adding that in case he didn't find any, that he should buy some fresh pudding tofu with seaweed for her. What? She thought that the reason those were running out of stock that quickly was because they were really popular, which was why she wanted him to grab them quickly. But our protagonist knew better, as he thought to himself that the food she wanted to eat was just that weird that not many people wanted to eat it, which was why they didn't restock on it. But he didn't have time to argue with her about it, and he just left. He had 5 minutes before the interview, which should be enough. However, when he stopped on the crosswalks, as I mentioned earlier, he looked to the side and saw an oncoming truck that didn't look like it would stop to let him cross the street, and the guy inside the truck was in utter panic. The truck driver then took a sharp turn, literally flipping his truck, just missing our protagonist by the skin of his teeth. And then we hear a big crash as the truck coon slammed into the nearby light pole. Our protagonist almost pooped himself from the fear, but he survived somehow, and he was so relieved that he's not a loser and that he wasn't the way he would die, because it would be such a pointless death, he thought. And then he saw the truck all smashed, and he remembered that there was a driver and that he should check in on him. But when he approached the truck, he heard some noise from the inside, and then all of a sudden a bunch of horses came out of the back of the truck, and before our protagonist even realized what was going on, the horses stomped on him. Not too long after, we see that our protagonist woke up with the last memory of him going for an interview and then getting stomped by the horses. He quickly got up and looked around himself, but he found the place unfamiliar, and so he wondered where he was. And then suddenly a voice started speaking, and it said to him that he just died, adding that while the horse thief was escaping, he crashed, and unfortunately he was stomped down by those stolen horses. The best death ever. Hearing this, our protagonist couldn't believe it, and he quickly got really depressed, apologizing to his sister to have such a lame death and leaving her by herself. And then that same voice addressed him, calling him shonen, young boy, but he was just in such a depressed state that he couldn't hear it at all, as he was saying that his family seemed to die in the same way, always because of traffic accidents. And then that voice spoke again with a slightly handsome woman grabbing him by his shoulder from the back. Bros, why is it that every single manhwa, the immortal woman that resurrects the protagonist, is always so handsome and hot, but when I recap it, she looks like this. No offense to you, lady. I'm sure you have a good heart. So this was when our protagonist turned and saw a big imposing woman jollily saying that he shouldn't ignore her as she was talking to him, but the only word that came to his mind was oak. And she knew what he thought, and she then gave him a pound on the head because she got angry that he called her an oak, adding that she was the immortal lordess. But he was just flabbergasted that she was able to read his mind because he didn't say oak, he thought oak. But he was probably thinking about Professor Oak from Pokemon. Now, after a bit of back and forth conversation, our protagonist was convinced that she wasn't a regular person, and she told him that the reason she was meeting him was because when the 10th million person passed away, that one person would be granted an opportunity to come to the new world, and then she asked him if he wanted to be revived in the new world, or other choice is to simply die. And our protagonist asked her if he could just go back to his old world, and he quickly found out that his only options were to permanently die or go to the new world. He asked her if that meant he would be reborn, and she told him that he would just die if he was the same way as he was right there, and that instead of that, she would give him a special ability which he would need as this new world had tons of monsters and magic, and she added that he should hunt the monsters down to gain experience and loot in order to level up, just as this new world was meant to be like an RPG game. The immortal lady then asked him to choose one ability, also saying that he should immediately choose the knight ability, but our protagonist didn't want it and then asked her to present him with other options, and as there were many options, he asked her to recommend him something which would be handy for surviving in this new world, and when he saw the recommendations, he asked her that since the ultimate goal was to defeat monsters, would there be any way for him to boost his experience bar 100 times safely? And she told him that he could only boost it by 20 as 100 was way too much. He gave it a bit of thought, weighing in on the pros and cons, and then he told her that he decided to take that ability to multiply his experience by 20 times. The immortal lordess got all giddy saying that his wish was granted, but since our protagonist didn't feel any change in his body, or else he asked her if that was it, as he thought there would be something more special, which seemed to annoy her a little bit, and so she approached him and grabbed him by his head, asking him if he wanted her to kiss him or something, and our protagonist was fighting for his life not to get smooched by this lady, as that would probably cause him to die all over again, or he wouldn't be able to live with himself after that at all. The immortal lady left him alone, and she opened the portal to leave, and she told him that there was one thing he should bear in mind, which was that this world, just like his old world, didn't have any missions, and her parting words were to enjoy his new normal life, and then she just disappeared as the portal closed. He was just left there thinking to himself that he shouldn't have asked to stay there, but since it was too late, he knew that he had to live with his decision. And now he was there by himself, alone, in this empty silent room, which was really awkward, and he got pretty nervous just staying there, and the more he was there by himself, the more he felt it was eating him up. And now to the point that he started screaming for this immortal lady, telling her that he wasn't ready, and then all of a sudden, a portal started opening with a new voice coming out, saying that it was noisy, and then we could see another woman, this one looking more like a child, telling our protagonist that she was the immortal lordess, and then she proceeded to tell him the same story the previous handsome lordess told him, like that he needed to know that as he was the 10th million person to die, which meant that he would get a big opportunity. He told this now sleepy immortal lady that he already had an ability, and she told him that she had a similar ability for him, and then she swished her hand and was already going back to his portal, telling him that it was done and that she was going back to sleep, and as her head was squeezing through that portal, our protagonist was all nervous, asking her not to go, but yeah, she was already gone, and our protagonist was slowly going insane with this new world not making much sense so far. And then not too long after, something happened, and our protagonist was suddenly in a big room, and when he looked around, he saw a sign that told him to read the book that was there, and in the book, there were some writings from a person called Dajiro that explained a bit about this new world that we find to be called Aza. By the way, You know, when you ask your mom, I want to watch Demon Slayer, I want to watch Tanjiro, and she tells you have Tanjiro at home, and then Tanjiro at home is just Tanjiro. Anyways, let's start with my lame jokes. Our protagonist also learned that there were other people in this new world and that he could also check his status window, which he immediately did. However, his status window showed his name wrong, calling him Ichiojo and not Ichinosuke, which was his real name. He was a bit annoyed with the situation as there were too many bugs in that world, which meant that these immortal ladies were pretty irresponsible. Ichinosuke then checked other stats in there, where he also found that in this world there were also jobs, which was really disappointing to him. The information told him that if he completed the quests, his job level would just go up, and it also said that civilian needed to pay taxes, while mage had to use their magic and hunter could just hunt for monsters. He also found the part that talked about the abilities, where he read his ability that he got from the first immortal lordess. But what was even more interesting was the ability that he got from the sleepy lordess that basically gave him the ability to multiply his already multiplied experience gain, which meant to his absolute astonishment that instead of 20 or 20 times 20 experience, he would actually gain experience 400 times faster than normal people. My bro was absolutely losing his mind over this. Like 400 times faster than normal people was game changing. Ichinosuke was thinking that in that world it would be much better if he had a job, because having no job meant that he had no extra status nor skills, and so the first thing he was about to do was to find a job and then start leveling up. He then checked the status window to learn more about the world, and it said that in that area where he was, he could find rabbits that he could use as food, and then he found a normal looking cloth bag which he was thinking of using as his food bag. But once he checked it, he realized that the bag was actually unlimited, as he didn't have bottom and he could put anything in there that he wanted. Besides that, the description of the achievements that he would get later would be shown on the bag as well. Our protagonist was also granted some coins, and the status window informed him that he was able to find a job in a nearby location, adding that in case he committed crime, his status would change to that of a criminal and he'd be pursued just like any criminal out there. But good thing he didn't want to be a criminal anyway, so phew. Anyways, I'm always trying to call him Inosuke. Ichinosuke decided to finally step outside, intending to first go to the northern city, and when he got out, he saw nature surrounding him, and it looked really amazing and felt good with the birds chirping in the background. He was really amazed by all this, and when he looked where he came from, the doors weren't there anymore, and so he thought that it was probably magic, just like everything in this world, which was really cool for him. And as he started walking forward, he felt that he stepped on something which really freaked him out, as it felt weird underneath his feet, and when he checked to see what it was, he found a squashed slime, and the status window notified him that he successfully defeated his first monster. Ichinosuke couldn't believe that he ran into slime, which reminded him of RPG games he used to play, and then a notification sound came that kinda scared him, but it was actually a sound of him leveling up, and this shocked him because only by beating one slime he managed to level up a few levels already. He was really happy with that speed of leveling up, and then when he saw some rabbits hopping around, Ichinosuke took a stone in his hand and, looking like an absolute maniac, started bashing on those poor little bunnies. In fact, he bashed them so hard and so mercilessly that there wasn't much left from them once he stopped. They were missing parts of their heads and stuff. It was kind of disgusting and gory, but he did manage to level up once again. But this time he got another notification telling him that he had some sub-job options like civilian, hunter, farmer, lumberjack, and other similar basic jobs unlocked. His status was skyrocketing as he was gaining experience 400 times the speed of regular people, which meant that killing 2 rabbits was equivalent to killing 800 of them. Like, when you say 400 times faster experience, you know, it sounds crazy, but when you put it like this, if he grinds for 1 minute, it's like as if he played the game, or lived this life, I guess, for 400 minutes. Crazy. Anyways, when our protagonist checked the status to delete no job option, he found out that he would be unable to choose that option ever again if he deleted it, and so he decided to keep it. at least for the time being, just to see its use, but he also thought that it was ironic that even in this new world he was still unemployed. And not too long after, he came to the city that had a sign at its entrance saying, "Welcome to Florence, the main city." And yes, this is the voice of the... What? Am I called Captain? Anyways, there was a lady there that pleasantly greeted our protagonist, and when he asked if he could enter the city, she told him that he first had to place his hand on a crystal ball that would show his job status. Being rather embarrassed by his no job status, Ichinosuke told her that his job was specific, and then the lady guard told him that it was fine as long as he wasn't a criminal, and that if he was a criminal, the crystal would become black color, and if he was a trader, it would become green color, and if he was an aristocrat, it would turn into a gold color. And we also learned that it was based on this color that tax would get calculated. After checking him, she then told him that he was safe to enter as long as he paid the entrance tax, which was accidentally the same amount that he got from Daijiro, whose diary he read. And as soon as he entered the city, he already leveled up his civilian position. Ichinosuke was impressed by the city, and he was also thinking about how different jobs had different quests to fulfill and other information that Lady Guard told him about. And as he noticed that he was getting some awkward looks from the passerbys, he felt uncomfortable in his normal clothes and decided to go find himself some new clothes. In the clothes shop, a very bubbly bearded guy dressed in women's clothes greeted him and made some uncomfortable remarks that made our protagonist really nervous, and so he just wanted to get it over with. Luckily for him, the seller decided to rebuy his vest from him at a really high price of 3 gold coins, which the seller told him was worth his entire year's revenue, and as the seller explained, it was mainly because the vest came from a different world, which meant that some researchers would be interested in it, and they were known for giving huge sums of money for that kind of stuff. And as the seller didn't have all that money at that time, he asked Ichinosuke if he would come back to take the money the next day, and our protagonist was really happy with that, thinking to himself that he had no clue that his interview vest would fetch such a high price. And then he went to a food store to buy some food for himself, but the environment there was really terrifying, as there are so many creepy looking people looking at him with their sinister eyes. But he knew he had to get some food, and so he got to the front desk where he asked to sell his rabbits, but the counter lady told him that he had to have an Explorer ID card for that. And as he was being confused and was explaining his strange no job status, a man with a mustache showed up from his back that the counter lady recognized as Matthias, and the man asked if there was any trouble, adding that he heard our protagonist's story and wanted to help with it. When they went outside, as the man recommended them, Matthias told him that there were many types of stores in that area, and that if he wanted to enter them, he had to have a required job. However, he also said that there was a way to get in without matching job status, which was to start his own sale. Ichinosuke then asked Matthias if he could help him with it, and the guy said that he was just a slave trader. And as soon as our protagonist heard this, a current of discomfort passed through his body and he nervously laughed. Matthias, seeing Ichinosuke's reaction, added that he wasn't a bad guy, as the slaves he took in were actually protected and given food and shelter, adding that there were laws for mistreating slaves, which were pretty vicious against those breaking them. Matthias even showed him the certificate that guaranteed the rights that his slaves enjoyed, and understanding the situation a little bit better now, our protagonist asked him how much would a slave cost, and Matthias told him that it depended on different factors, like the skills they had and other things, adding that if he took a human as a slave, it would cost anywhere from 1 to 3 golden coins. And remember, 3 golden coins is an entire year's worth of profit from that clothes shop man seller. And if he had any skills, the slave, human slave, or any other advantages, the price would just go up from there. Matthias then took Ichinosuke to his store, which was a pretty big building where he worked with slaves. Our protagonist was really impressed and was thinking to himself that this type of business had to bring in some great profit if he had such a property, and then Matthias told him to wait in the waiting room for a bit while he'd bring him a suitable slave for his condition. And not too long after, a woman that had some features of a wolf, you know, like a furry, showed up and shyly apologized for him having to wait. And then she introduced herself as Haru Watat of the White Wolf clan, and seeing this beautiful woman made Ichinosuke also embarrassed that he immediately blushed. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this girl is kinda cute, bros. I have a question for you though. Would you like to suck her toes? Yes? This is where I was waiting for you, you little simp. If you're on the Discord, you're banned right now. If you're not on the Discord and you wanted to join the Discord, don't even bother because you're gonna get banned immediately. Actually, join. Please join the Discord so we can ban you, because #1 rule, actually it's not #1, it's like 10th or something, but it doesn't matter, is no simps allowed. So bros, please don't simp over the virtual girls. Don't even simp over the real life girls, let alone virtual girls. Be a giga chat like me and have no girlfriend ever. What? I'm joking. I'm joking. I have plenty of girlfriends all day. Anyways, let's go back to the story. Sorry for the distraction. Now we see Ichinosuke dropping by the guild to sell the rabbits, and now we could see that his actual plan was, as he wasn't able to get into the guild because he didn't have that specific job, he could use his new slave, Haru Watat, that could go inside instead of him without violating any law and sell the rabbits in his stead. But for some reason it was taking her too long to come out of the guild, and our protagonist started thinking that she escaped. But then as he was getting nervous, Haru came out and apologized to him for waiting too long, and when he saw her, he nervously asked her why she took that long, and she told him that he actually told her to try to make the most out of it, so she asked to use the guild's kitchen to cut the rabbits into parts. When Ichinosuke heard her, he felt relieved and then thanked her. Haru then gave him the money she got from the rabbits, but he was surprised as he expected less than that, which meant that Haru cutting them up was really advantageous, and when he realized this, he then apologized to Haru. As they were walking through the city, Ichinosuke was saying how great it was to be able to enter the guild, and then he was fantasizing about becoming a swordsman or something similar that would enable him to enter the guild. And hearing him, Haru told him that there was a maze in the city where if he was to survive for 3 years, he'd be able to become a swordsman. Our protagonist figured if it took 3 years for normal people, it would take him only 3 days. And then he told Haru that there was a reason why he didn't want to change his job, but he was still interested in getting into that maze. Haru told him that if he wanted to go, that he should bring her as well, since her species were known for good hearing and smelling, and so she would be useful. She made it really awkward for our protagonist when she said that even if he got lost, she would be able to smell his smell. Like bro was literally smelling himself as he grew too self-conscious after hearing this. And then when she said that, she could even hear the sound of his stomach, and he just wanted her to stop saying these things because he was hella uncomfortable as he didn't want anyone sniffing him like that. Ichinosuke then told her that she was really useful to him, adding that if he only had her by his side, he would be set, and she was happy to hear this. He then wanted to treat her with some barbecue for the rabbits she helped him with, and our protagonist picked up that when Haru was confident, she would wag her tail. He also told her that he wouldn't be bringing her to the maze, as that would be rather dangerous for her, and not endangering slaves was part of the slave landing regulations. They then went back to Matthias, and when they were parting ways, they both thanked each other, with Haru telling him that she was happy that she could go out, even if it was for a short period of time, it was still fun. Ichinosuke then went over to Matthias and told him the reason he wouldn't take Haru to the maze, and Matthias told him that in their kingdom, slaves weren't under any kind of strict regulations, and that they could set the conditions for their buyers to some extent, but that would only only apply to their first year. This piqued our protagonist's interest, and so he asked about Haru's conditions, and Matthias told him that her only condition was that the buyer was stronger than her, explaining that the white wolf would only be loyal to someone that is stronger than them. Matthias also mentioned that one royal member wanted to buy Haru, but since he proved to be weaker than Haru in a battle against her, he now had to wait for the first year to end so that the conditions would expire, and then he'd be able to buy her, and we learn that there were only 10 days left for this first year to expire. Ichinosuke was thinking to himself that this world was similar to the old one in terms of money having most of the power and influence over everything else. Matthias then apologized to our protagonist for introducing Haru to him, as he just wanted someone who wasn't under the guild to take her out for a bit, as he couldn't go out with her master. Our protagonist was a bit annoyed that Haru was in that kind of situation, and so he asked Matthias how much Haru would cost, and Matthias told him that her regular price was 100k, but if he could beat her, then she would cost only 30k, which was the exact money that our protagonist had that he got from selling the vest. He gave it some thought and then decided to not buy her, as it was pretty pricey, and even though her situation was pitiful, it was legal in this world after all, and if he allowed himself to get emotional like that, he'd end up buying every slave he'd come across, and there was no merit he'd get from that. When he left that slave shop, he was thinking that if he could use the guild, he could just rent one, and with his ability, he truly was the only one he needed, as he thought. And he was also thinking, if he bought a slave, he'd have to pay additional tax and other kinds of fees, which would be really bothersome. But it turned out, the more he thought about it, the more confused he was about the situation and what he really wanted, until he finally made a decision that he wanted to buy Haru, as in that way he would prevent her being bought by someone she didn't like. There was a possibility that Haru would be happier to be with that royal, but then again, our protagonist would stick with his decision, and as he only had 9 more days to challenge Haru to a battle and defeat her, he knew he had to find a way to prepare himself until then to become stronger. He didn't know anything about this world and the ways he could get stronger, and even though he felt uncomfortable about it, he decided to ask that weird seller that dressed like a woman, and once he explained his situation, the seller told him that he was an ex-adventurer, adding that from that perspective, his advice would be of utmost importance. He also told Ichinosuke that he believed our protagonist was cut out to be an adventurer, and since he wanted to do a good deed and to save that slave, the seller would help him. The seller told him that he was right in his decision to buy her, as if the white wolf had to obey someone that was weaker than them, it would be worse than death, and if it was possible, they would choose death over that kind of life. But since Haru was wearing slave collar, she wouldn't be able to decide for herself, and she would have to follow orders. The seller also added that in that case, if something that was worse than death continued for such a long time, that slave white wolf would definitely not be happy. This motivated our protagonist even further, and the seller loved his high spirits. A moment after, we see Ichinosuke dressed in his adventurer uniform that looked pretty decent on him, and we find out that this used to belong to the seller's best friend that was killed by a monster, and since the seller didn't want to party with anyone else, he quit the adventuring profession for good. Ichinosuke thanked the seller, whose name we now learn to be this was not his name, definitely. His name is Maganet, adding that he shouldn't give him something that was connected to memories, but Maganet told him that it was more important that the items were used true to their function, adding that he thought that his best friend would be happy if he used it. On his way to the maze, our protagonist was checking his status, and he remembered that Maganet told him that just having a sword, it would count as if he was a low-level swordsman already, but he knew that just holding a sword wouldn't help much and that he had to learn some swordsmanship. And at the gate of the maze, he found the same gate guard that he saw at the entrance to the city, and she greeted him as pleasantly as before, and then she told him that she changed shifts, which was why she was now guarding the entrance to the maze. She then told him that even though it was for beginners, He should be careful inside, as it was known for some people to had died in there, and this sent shivers down his spine. And then she also told him that she does patrol sometimes and that they might meet each other inside. Not too long after, we see that Ichinosuke was in the maze and he wasn't confident in using a sword even for a bit. He decided to pick up a stone that he found lying there and use that for the time being. He then ran across to a werewolf that looked like he was by himself, but once our protagonist approached him to get him from the back, he quickly found himself in a difficult situation as he was surrounded by a bunch of those werewolves, and they were huge and vicious, and so Ichinosuke knew that he was done for, as he knew that even those with actual skill would have problems with these many of these beasts, especially him without any skills. When all hope seemed lost, two people showed up, a girl and a boy that looked like they were somewhat experienced adventurers, and the girl asked the boy if they should help him, and he just wanted to make a bet about our protagonist losing. They had a back and forth argument, and they settled on actually not helping our protagonist since he was an adventurer himself, which meant that they were rivals. And when the wolves tried to approach them, the girl pulled out a whip and scared the wolves to back away from them, making them solely focus on our protagonist again. Ichinosuke was absolutely shocked by this, but he knew that his only way was to kill at least one of these wolves and then level up, and so he ran waiting for the right opportunity to strike with his stone. But instead of that, unexpectedly, one of them showed up out of nowhere and bit our protagonist's arm. Ichinosuke started to scream in agony and toss and turn with the werewolf, but as pain was setting in, our protagonist was angrier, and so when they were on the werewolf's back, somehow Ichinosuke managed to sever his head apart from his body with his bare hands, and when he looked to see how his level was doing, he saw that he actually didn't get any notification, and he had no clue why this happened. But as he was thinking of his strategy on how to deal with the rest of the wolves, he started getting notification, and not just one, but a bunch of them, where he leveled up and got a lot of different skills and setting options. And now after leveling up, he felt that his body was lighter and he was full of energy. He then started slashing those werewolves like they were nothing with his newfound abilities, and he really dealt with them with ease, bros. So much so that he was actually now having fun, and after he defeated all of them, he got more level ups, and those werewolves also dropped some useful items that he could later sell at the guild. Also, an interesting thing he learned was that his HP level was much higher than the average of this world, but now since he was bitten, he saw that he was actually in danger, so he had to take care of himself. And as he was thinking of that, he got distracted by his audience, which were those two wacky adventurers that were now all lovey-dovey with each other, and our protagonist over here was just looking at them and thinking to himself, "Who the hell are these weirdos?" Ichinosuke also got a new ability, which was a job checker, and he immediately used it on those two, and a bit later on that gate guard as he ran into her somewhere in the maze, and it was pretty informative. When she saw that he was a bit injured, she gave him some healing potion that was bitter, so much so that our protagonist just spat it out, which made her laugh. She told him that even though it wasn't tasty, it was really good for his wound, and then she told him that she had to go, adding that he shouldn't push himself too much, and he took that as a sign to take a rest. And as he was already feeling pretty tired from the maze, and he was pretty happy with his current level. And sometimes later, we see him back with that Maganet guys, and Maganet offered him to stay the night at his guest house. Our protagonist was really grateful to him for helping him so much, and so he asked if there was anything he could do for him in return, and the guy said that he could use his body, and before he even finished, Ichinosuke was already regretting asking him that, as many ways Maganeto could use his body rushed through his head. But then Maganeto finished saying that he could use his body to carry some stuff around. Yeah, definitely not sus. And our protagonist was just like, phew, totally relieved. So much so that he actually felt hype to help him with anything but you know, anything but that. But little did he know that awkwardness didn't end there. No, no, no. As he went to take a bath, the Magnet dude was literally peeking, and then when our protagonist pointed out this, Magneto was the one to act like a victim, but ignoring his perversions and weirdness, Ichinosuke thought that he was actually a caring guy. And now, as the dinner was being set up, our protagonist noticed that Magnet was placing dishes for 3 people, and so he asked him about this, and Magnet told him that actually that gate guardian, whose name we now learn to be Solon, would be joining them, but she was already being late, and just several moments later, some guy showed up telling Magnet that Solon still hadn't returned from the maze, which really made Magnet worried, while Ichinosuke was curious about what was going on. Hearing that Solon was missing, our protagonist offered himself to go there, and Magnet told him that it was really dangerous, especially if he went to the deeper levels, and there were also maze thieves. But the more he heard how dangerous the maze was, the more he wanted to help, until he came up with an idea where he would track Solon down and bring her back. But in order to do that, he needed Haru because of her extremely good smelling senses, and so he went to Matthias and explained him the situation. But Matthias told him that he, as a slave trader, just couldn't put his slaves in such a danger, and then Ichinosuke offered him 20 million as a deposit, promising to him that he would bring him more and then buy Haru off from him. Matthias gave it a bit of thought, and then after asking Haru about it, he agreed to it, and Haru too didn't want anything more but to be able to help in such a situation. Matthias even gave Haru her sword back that Haru thought was long sold. On their way to the maze, Haru asked our protagonist why he wanted to help Solon, and our protagonist told her that she, Solon, helped him, and she was also in the same inn he was staying in, and he couldn't just ignore something like this happening. When they came to the maze, at first Haru couldn't smell anything until Ichinosuke gave her the potion that Solon gave him earlier that day, and that really helped her sniffing something out, and so they headed one direction, and after a bit of walking, they came across some werewolves. Haru offered to deal with them, but our protagonist felt really confident about it, and so he said that he'd get rid of them, which he did pretty swiftly, and when Haru saw this, she was pretty impressed, telling him that the quick slashes he used weren't the low-level trainee level ones. She then told him where the scent was leading them, and so they went that way, but as they were entering the second floor now, she told him that they were about to encounter much stronger monsters and that they should be wary. Ichinosuke noticed that she kept calling him master, and so he told her that she didn't have to do it because he knew that white wolves despised following orders of those that were weaker than them, and then surprisingly, Haru told him that he was actually stronger than her, and so that she didn't mind, and before making it awkward anymore, she told our protagonist that they should just keep looking for Solon as that was their top priority. And when they came across some monsters on the second level, Haru wanted to prove herself, and so she dashed at them and eliminated all of them, while our protagonist was admiring her speed and her strength, and as he got a new skill where he could get info on different skills, he analyzed her, and it turned out that she was swordsman level 23, which was pretty impressive, but at least he knew now what level he had to surpass to become stronger than her. Haru then told Ichinosuke to finish off the monsters because she left them for him so that he could gain experience from them, but he told her that she should do it because she already beat them, and she was really surprised by this. A bit later, we see them reach floor 3, and as they were walking and following Solon's scent, Haru told him about the maze thieves that he was curious about, where we learn that they would basically wait in the maze for the adventurers to die and then take their equipment and sell them later on. After a bit of walking, they encountered a goblin, and Ichinosuke knew that he had to get stronger for the more difficult levels of the maze, so he offered to deal with the goblin, but his confidence went down after the first slash didn't work, and now he had to wait for 10-second cooldown to be able to use it again, and he really struggled with that goblin during that time. In fact, he was so desperate that he kicked the goblin straight in the balls, thinking that that was his ace move. but it turned out that that was a female goblin, and the goblin wanted retaliation for the dirty move our protagonist tried to pull. But luckily, those 10 seconds expired, and Ichinosuke used his slash ability with his bare hands, and he killed the goblin. As a reward, he leveled up and got a new skill called Searching Intuition, which was an ability for him to sense the presence of other living beings around him. Haru was really impressed by this, and then they went on further after the scent, but then they stopped, and Haru told our protagonist that she couldn't feel the scent from that point onwards, and this really worried Ichinosuke, that thought that she might have died. But then suddenly he felt this presence somewhere near with his newly found skill, and when he did some investigation, he found a secret gate that was basically invisible, and when they both got in, it turned out that that was actually the Maze Thief's hideout location, and it was absolutely full of loot. They then sneaked around until they came to a place where they overheard some thieves talking about capturing Solon and how they were waiting for their boss to come, and without waiting much, Ichinosuke and Haru already made a plan and then rushed out from their hideout and attacked them. They managed to get one of them down pretty quickly, and then Haru dealt with the other two guys that were left, and she dealt with them with such a speed that left our protagonist impressed again, like he couldn't even see her move. It was that quick. Then they went to the back room to take Solon, but at that moment the thieves boss showed up, and he was a huge level 14 bandit, and the big boy was getting angry seeing all his men down. And after Haru told our protagonist that they had a slim chance of winning against this big scary looking dude, Ichinosuke decided to go a different route, pretending dumb, told the bandit boss that his men just had too much drink and just fainted, and after he told his little story, he was pretty sure he wasn't convincing enough and that boss would see right through this nonsense. But boy oh boy was he mistaken. The boss believed all of it. The bandit boss told him that they should have said this sooner, as he was planning on killing them right there on the spot, and we know that this guy was crazy. They had some discussion about the booze, because the boss wasn't just an idiot, he was also a drunkard. He even coldly chopped one of his guys' head because he dared to drink his booze. The boss also noticed that Haru had a slave collar on, and he got a little bit suspicious, but then Ichinosuke told him another story of how she was his wife, and then he lost her to a slave trader, and then he got her back, and now the reason why he was involved with the bandits was because of that. And this time he was sure that he went overboard with the story, but we can only guess that he underestimated how dumb this big guy was, because he actually believed him and even got emotional over this made up story. Ichinosuke was sure he was done for with this menacing guy towering above them with his killing intent, but nah, he ate it all up like a delicious ice cream. Ice cream so good, yes yes yes. But when things started to go downhill for them was when the bandit boss wanted to send Ichinosuke to get some more drinks while Haru would stay and entertain him a bit, and our protagonist just couldn't allow this to happen, and so he broke his character and decided to face this giant guy despite knowing that he couldn't take him down, seeing that the bandit boss's axe was bigger than him, but he knew that he already died once and that there was nothing scarier than that. And now seeing our protagonist looking all worried, the bandit boss told him that he was probably regretting challenging him like that, as he had to know that he had no chance to beat him. And at that moment, Ichinosuke just sighed and said that he had no choice, and then cut off the heads of the bandits that were on the ground, and because of this he leveled up and got an increase on bunch of skills he had. Our protagonist definitely wasn't too happy that he killed those human beings, but he knew that he had to do it in order to at least get a fighting chance and save Haru. Seeing his men being killed in front of him, the giant bandit boss didn't take it lightly and then started going off on a rampage, swinging his axe everywhere, and Ichinosuke was barely being able to evade those attacks. He couldn't believe how powerful this guy was, and he knew that if he was just hit once with that axe, it would be all over for him. And when Haru saw that our protagonist was really pressured and put in a really bad situation, she joined in and threw a rock at the giant's head, which just got him irritated, and so he hit Haru with the side of his axe, sending her flying into the wall, and then the bandit boss went back to attacking Ichinosuke. Our protagonist was really angry seeing what happened to Haru, and so his power of simp emerged, and he started attacking the giant more relentlessly, but this attack had no impact on the giant because he was a simp. If you want to be the giant, you have to be a Giga Chad. No, this isn't the story. His attack had no impact on the giant bandit that defended himself with these. This is why he didn't have impact, because the boss defended himself. Ichinosuke was just shocked at the speed this giant dude moved at, because it definitely didn't match his appearance. And after they fought some longer, the giant made a disturbing joke about how he would let our protagonist live by first cutting off all of his limbs and then making him watch abuse the girl, and this really had our protagonist's blood boiling, and so he dashed for another attack, and even though it didn't look any different from before and Bandit Boss thought nothing of it, he actually did manage to get a cut on the giant's face, and we could see that our protagonist's confidence started growing from this as he thought to himself that he figured the giant's movements, where he just needed to wait for the giant to finish his heavy attacks and then find the right moment to send an attack of his own. The menacing giant kept swinging his huge axe, but he was missing as Ichinosuke was evading them, and he too was swinging his sword at him as well, but it didn't seem like any of them landed, and then the giant's axe crashed into Ichinosuke's sword, which made his sword break, which was really discouraging to our protagonist as he thought that he had to fight with this huge guy with just some stones. My bro was in despair, thinking of the reason the sword had broken in such a critical moment, but then to our protagonist's absolute shock, when the giant made his first step towards Ichinosuke, threatening him with death, the giant bandit just spat out some blood, and then we could see that there was a pretty big cut across his belly, and then he just fell down on the ground. It was at this moment that Ichinosuke found out that he actually won this battle, and he then quickly ran towards Haru, asking her if she was okay and if her toes were dry, so he could suck them. What? No, this didn't happen. This is some other story. Anyways, she was a bit confused as she just got concussion again, but he then gave her some potion and told her that she didn't have to worry as the bandits were defeated. Haru then told our protagonist that she was really happy that Ichinosuke used her name like that, and before our protagonist was able to respond back to her, he heard some noise, and then when he looked back, he noticed that wacky couple of adventurers from before crouching and staring at the giant bandit. One of them said that it was strange that that bandit decided to sleep here. Yup, they were just stupid like that, since they didn't even realize the guy's dead. They're thinking he's just sleeping. When they saw our protagonist, they recognized him from earlier and then cluelessly told him that he shouldn't be there as it was pretty dangerous. Ichinosuke then told them that he was actually the one that defeated the bandit, and the wacky boy told him that if that was the case, the bandit boss had to be really weak, and then he asked him what they were planning on doing with him, and our protagonist told him that he first thought of killing him, but since he didn't find any reason, as he was already down and out, he didn't want to do that. This goofy ass couple, hearing our protagonist say this, so this is an opportunity to make some money, and they asked Ichinosuke if they could help him carry the big guy out, as they could all get a good sum for handing him over to the authorities. Our protagonist gave it a bit of thought, thinking that he also had to bring Solon back home, and then he asked Haru for her opinion, as she enthusiastically agreed that they should do it. And as they were heading back out of the maze, the goofy ass couple was dragging the giant boss by his legs as he kept smacking anything on the ground with his head, which Ichinosuke found unnecessary, but this wacky boy told him that they shouldn't have any mercy with the bandits as they were their enemies, and at that time Solon woke up and our protagonist told her the entire story of what had happened. Solon found it ironic that she was actually the one that warned him about about the bandits and then ended up being caught by them. She was also familiar with the wacky couple, whose names we now learn to be Joffrey and Alice, and when our protagonist asked her about them, she told him that these two were pretty infamous in the city for countless of troublesome behaviors, adding that it was never serious enough for them to get arrested. She also said that the guards were having a headache with them as they never seemed to cross that line to be arrested, but their mischievous actions were bad enough to cause the guards to worry. Solon then said that even though they were like that, she never expected them to work for bandits, and then Solon alongside Haru and our protagonist all had stares of disappointment at them, and Joffrey and Alice felt called out, and so they desperately defended themselves by saying that even though they worked for them, they had no clue who they were and they never got to do anything for them. But Solon didn't buy any of this, and so she told them that they would later go down to the station with her, and then she blackmailed them by telling them that if they help them carry that body quick to the station, she might reconsider their case. When they were out of the maze, they went to the station where Solon explained the whole situation and how she was caught by the bandits and then saved by Ichinosuke and Haru, and when the guard heard all of the story, he went to our protagonist and Haru and bowed down to them, deeply thanking them for saving Solon, adding that they would get rewarded for catching the bandit boss the day after when they visited the Adventurers Guild. Ichinosuke reminded Solon that Maganet was worried about her and that she should go back to the inn so that Maganet knew that she was okay. On their way to Maganet's place, our protagonist told Haru that he would be taking her to Matthias after they visited Maganet, but she told him that Matthias' place was already closed and that it was okay if she returned the morning after. Is my bro about to get some tippy toe action? Look, bros, I'm joking about these toes. Stop calling me sus. I'm not sus. I'm a gigachad. My mom says I'm a gigachad, so you know it's true. Nobody else says it, but my mom says so. Yeah, anyways, when they came back to Maganet, he hugged Solon so hard that both of them ended up crying, with Maganet from genuine happiness for Solon to be alive, and Solon from the pain, as Maganet was squeezing like a bloody bear. Like bro dressing like a woman wasn't aware of his manly strength. Ichinosuke hated to ruin the good vibes, but he had to show Maganet the sword that he broke, and when he saw the sword, Maganet said that it was absolutely alright since it served its purpose of protecting both him and Solon, adding that the previous owner would probably be happy with that as well. And then, despite our protagonist running for his life, Maganet got his hands on him and hugged him as well, with that same rib-snapping hug. As he was being squeezed to death, Solon casually narrated how Maganet used to be a warrior, and a tough one at that, and how people avoided getting close to him because of his deathly strength, but obviously it was unnecessary to say any of that, as Ichinosuke was dying there. When he survived that hug, Ichinosuke decided to use his ability to check Maganet's skill and level, and we learned that he was actually level 38, which was the highest he saw thus far. Maganet then noticed Haru and then told her that she was probably the one Ichinosuke was talking so much about, adding that she could become his little sister, which Solon protested by saying that they didn't even look alike, but Maganet interpreted it as her just being jealous. He then invited Haru to stay for dinner, as they had a lot of food, but Haru felt really uncomfortable with that, saying that she was a slave girl. But after he kept insisting, Haru said that she just didn't want to get used to such a good food, only to have to return to slave food again, as it might cause issues for her. But after some time convincing, she eventually accepted. Maganeto, all jolly, then asked Solon to help him prepare the meals, as there was a lot of food to make, and when they went away, our protagonist, now slightly embarrassed, asked Haru if she thought of him to be strong enough, and she told him that she definitely felt he was stronger than her since he was able to defeat that bandit boss and she couldn't. And then after he gathered enough courage, he then came out with it and told her confidently that he wanted to buy her back, and she was shocked for a moment, and then she got all emotional telling him that she was really happy with that, but then she told him that, as he probably knew, there was a noble that was interested in her, and as someone who donated huge sums of money, they would definitely cause issues for Ichinosuke. But our protagonist told her that he was fine with that, as he didn't even intend on joining the guild anyways, and she could do the money transfers and other things for him at the guilds, so there would be no problems from that side. Haru then said that she understood his points, but he would still feel the pressure from the influence of this noble, and she was thinking that there would be nothing worse than Ichinosuke abandoning her after she was with him. He told her that she didn't have to worry about any of that, as he was ready for that type of life, and even if they were only able to sell things half the price, they would just get more of it, and as long as it was okay with her, he had no issues. Haru told him that that was the way white wolves lived, as they were natural immigrants, but she was still not sure. Ichinosuke got all serious and told her that the only thing that mattered at that point was her opinion, and she then timidly asked him if it was really okay if she stayed with him, and then he gave her a big hug that slightly shocked her, and then he told her that that was exactly what he wanted to hear, and that they would figure out the rest as they went along. Meanwhile, both Maganet and Solon eavesdropped on them and relished this kinda romantic sight, but then Magneto-kun walked up behind our protagonist, slapped him on the head, and told him that if he was finished, that they should join up and eat food before it got cold. The next day, we see that our protagonist was already at Matthias' place, getting the final arrangements done for officially buying Haru. Matthias also informed him about some other stuff that he needed to know, like the fact that if he lost the documents of ownership, he would basically lose his rights to her, and then she could be placed under the ownership of someone else, and this got our protagonist a bit nervous. Matthias then told our protagonist that he knew from the time he met him that he would be best for Haru, and Ichinosuke told him that at that time he definitely wasn't stronger than her, and Matthias then said that he had the strength of the heart, as it helps someone without delay when he saw that someone was in trouble, and that was the strength that Haru was looking for and not the strength of power. And as Ichinosuke was pondering over how blessed he was to have Haru with him, Haru showed up with a new attire, and Matthias said that it was a gift from their business. Our protagonist thought that it really looked good on her, and she was all happy to hear this. Then they said their byes to Matthias, and Ichinosuke suggested that they make a party together at the guild to make it official, and then he extended his hand to her, telling her that he really hoped they could help and count on each other for the journey that was ahead of them, and Haru was just confused with this amazing treatment that she never felt before. And so the two of them went to the Adventurers Guild to register as a party, and then the lady at the counter asked our protagonist to show his ownership paperwork. He then signed some stuff for making it official, but since he was still not quite used to the new language of this world, he asked Haru for help. And then a big blonde guy showed up behind him, saying some provocative stuff to Ichinosuke, like that he should return Haru back. But just as our protagonist was starting to get angry and fight this guy, Haru told him that the guy was just trying to pick a fight with him, which might end up with him being banned from entering the guild ever again. The blonde guy then insulted Haru, calling her some terrible racist names, which really boiled our protagonist's blood, but as he knew that he shouldn't fight him in there, he calmed down, and also Ichinosuke figured from this that this blonde guy was probably working for that noble, and so he asked him about it, but the blonde guy just tried pretending that he didn't know anything about it, adding a low-key threat that since he already knew that the noble wanted to buy this slave, he shouldn't have bought her, as that noble would come in several days, and if he couldn't buy Haru, he'd be really upset, as that would bring shame to his family, and so he would do some terrible things. He then proceeded to insult Ichinosuke, calling him all kinds of names, and this time surprisingly, Haru got really angry to the point that she just wanted to jump on that tall dude and choke him out, and both our protagonist and the blonde guy could feel the killing intent. Like, the tall guy was afraid for his life, seeing this small girl raging like that. However, Ichinosuke managed to calm her down, repeating to her the same things she told him before, how this was a trick to get them in trouble and how they needed to be patient until the right time came. And as he wanted to just get the hell out of there, he then tried speeding up process by canceling selling the stones and telling the counter lady that they just wanted to collect their bounty and be on their way. The blonde guy then called our protagonist a coward, adding that they could still fight in an arena where the fighting to death was actually allowed. Haru got angry again, saying that she would be the one to fight him, but as the blonde guy said before, our protagonist told her that he wasn't a swordsman, which meant that she would have to fight him without any weapons, which would put her at a disadvantage. He then told the tall guy that he'd gladly fight him, but not on that day, but on the day the noble came, adding that he should stay away from them until then, and the blonde guy agreed, keeping his smug expression on his face, and then he left, still dishing out a bunch of insults as if he was in a Call of Duty lobby and not in an adventurer's inn. And we could see that our protagonist was really all personal about this guy, as he wanted to humiliate him to never again behave that arrogantly, as he was menacingly saying that he would show him the overwhelming gap in their power. And then we learn that to become a fighter like that blonde obnoxious guy, our protagonist would first have to start from being a lumberjack and then level up until level 10, which didn't seem that easy to do. Ichinosuke then said that they should go to the maze after lunch, and Haru wholeheartedly agreed. Later at the restaurant, as our protagonist sat down, he noticed that Haru was still standing, and so he asked her to sit, but to his absolute shock, she just knelt down beside him. He was astonished at this and then told her to sit on a chair like a normal person, and she told him that she couldn't as she was a slave, but our protagonist kept insisting that she sit down as he was a regular there and she had nothing to worry about. Eventually she gave in and then sat on the chair. However, she felt really uncomfortable, turning around to see if anyone was judgingly looking at her. They also had another inconvenience, as the waiters only brought him water and not Haru, and so he had to call the waiter back and ask him to bring another glass of water, and as they had some extra money from that bounty, he ordered